and this being a part of fugitive healing as well, and like letting go of like
A need for
need to be,
approval.
yeah, a need for approval, or like showing people in spite of what you think they're gonna think of you. You know what I mean? Like proving yourself because you think that people are gonna perceive you in a certain way.
You know what I'd be saying? I love to fulfill a stereotype. I love to fulfill a stereotype. I'm like a stereotype. Oh, you think this is what Black people do? Yeah, it's what I do too. We do it. We do
Mhm.
it. Oh no. Sup,
Sup,
fam?
fam?
We're
We're
the
the
Cosmic
Cosmic
Healing
Healing
Sisters.
Sisters.
I'm Kay Darling.
And I'm Erica Joy.
We're community healing justice practitioners offering up holistic peer support.
And now, hot takes with the very first season of our podcast.
We'll be talking about healing, cosmically and otherwise,
The cosmos, literally and spiritually,
and sisterhood because we're in this shit together.
sometimes serious, oftentimes silly.
Always towards holistic liberation.
To hang out with us in more ways than one, check out the link in our description.
And let us know what you think.
Hello, Kay.
Hey, hey, EJ. How's it going, sis?
It's going okay. You
Is it?
know,
How's your morning been?
my morning's been pretty nice, I suppose. I had some yummy pancakes because, I'm on this pancake kick. I
Yeah.
can't go a day without some pancakes
What
because,
do you put on your pancakes?
well,
I'm
since
just interested.
since being here in Peru, I've been using agave.
You know, agave for me started as like a thing in St. Croix when I was living in St. Croix for a few months back in 2021, right? And so St. Croix is one of the Virgin Islands, and it was like coast to coast sugarcane plantation when like back in the days of enslavement.
Yeah.
And I got there and I just started having like really nauseating sort of responses to sugar.
Oof.
And I was like, we need an alternative because there's something just like absolutely disgusting about sugar while I'm here.
Yeah.
And so I started turning to agave.
So you know what that has me thinking about how with like wheat and gluten and how it's all messed up in the US and how a lot of times people will have like problems with wheat and gluten in the US, but then they go to other countries and it's fine. And I know with the sugar cane, it's the sugar, it's presumably, but maybe not fully, like more of a spiritual connection that you were having problems with, consuming
Yeah,
it. But I wonder if also because of the mass like selling of it and the mass like producing of it also
mass production. I mean, I think it's more so it's like a really strenuous process.
yeah,
Um, Sugarcane. There are these massive like silo sort of
got you.
things. And I think there would be fire involved. It was like a dangerous process.
Yeah.
And so I think less so the mass production of it in like just a theoretical sense and more so like, the mass murder involved in bringing it to the people and just the violence of
Yeah.
the production.
Yeah. Yes, I definitely I see what you mean, but I guess what I'm also saying is like because of the like things done to wheat in order to mass produce it is like
Yeah.
obviously part of the reason why it's like presenting
Poisonous.
problems. Yeah. And so I'm like wondering if that same thing was happening with sugarcane basically. If like what they're doing in order to continue mass producing it. Um,
Yeah.
is like
Yeah.
I think it's like a everything, but that wasn't necessarily when you have told me that in the past. I've always been, oh, it's like a spiritual like and like
Ancestral.
psychic kind of like yeah, ancestral kind of like no. But I'm also wondering if there's like
No, that's how it felt because it felt like on St. Croix, I felt very connected to the spirits of the land and felt
Hmm.
very like, oh, these are folks who might want to continue with me forward on my journey,
Yeah.
sort of thing. And so I think there was just a like as I'm like experimenting with working with sort of like vesselhood for
That's
varying
good.
ancestors. Yeah, like knowing myself and opening myself as a vessel for spirits who are like who want to come with me on
Yeah.
my journey, who want to like sort of like accompany me alongside my embodiment, but not necessarily like take on embodiment on their own accord.
Okay.
Um, I feel like they were like spirit friends who just had like strong, visceral reactions to sugar, which makes sense.
Gotcha.
Um,
Yeah.
and one of the main like stories, lore of St. Croix is from Queen Mary, I want to say her name was,
Okay.
burned down. She was like with the crew, like burned a lot of those sugar plantations to the ground.
Right.
And so there's just also like a history of like rage in that space. So it's like, I do think rage and disgust and repulsion kind of come in the same sort of
Wow.
all, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel
Especially,
like it kind of gets into what we're talking about today with fugitive
yeah.
ending.
Fugitive, healing. Yeah. For our first healing episode, I wanted to talk about this. I don't know what to call it, like a framework, like an experiential framework that I'm working with.
Okay. Yeah, no, when you had mentioned to me before, I was like, well, I've never heard of that before, fugitive healing. And so like when I first like my just like automatic kind of like, what could that be? I was thinking of like people who were deemed fugitives healing, basically, like people who have just been like people who are like who've been imprisoned, um, or folks who are just like for like the who they are already like put into a box of being fugitive. So especially like Black folks, um, people within the LGBTQ community, and like other POC who have just like been like boxed of like, oh, we already know you're gonna be doing up to something, and like trying to like or said that will be up to something. Um, and that like our very existence is fugitive. And so then how do we like heal through that? Or how do we like kind of heal within that?
What I'm working with in
Mhm.
regards to how I am healing, what healing has looked like for me.
Mhm.
And I think the word fugitive comes out of like an understanding that like mass incarceration affects more than just those who are presently incarcerated, of course.
Yeah.
Mass incarceration is like the keystone of our carceral society.
Yeah.
Um, and that carceral society is predominantly to subjugate Black people.
Mhm.
Um, and so, like, this working with the US as like the carceral nation that it is, the United States not only has the largest military, but also the largest prison population. And I mean, obviously, those two things are not distinct from one another, and we're finding them more closely tied with every passing year, you know? And
Uh,
so there is this awareness for those who are willing to accept like the reality of the situation, that we are all just one move, one wrong turn away from increased subjugation and increased confinement, you know? And so, like, when we're just like always and forever prey to this system, then that makes for like a fugitive individual, you know, that makes for just like a forever fugitive in a sense. And so like, yeah, so what does it mean to like work with that identity towards healing, you know? And so like there is a lot of freedom tied up in a fugitive existence if you use that, if you use it for your own benefit, you know what I mean? And that's been the journey of finding the freedom in a really shit situation.
how are you finding, like, what kind of freedom? Like, yeah, say more. Say more.
You seem skeptical. It feels like it's coming from a place of skepticism.
No, I think it's just more so like that's just a vague thing to say. Like, you know, I want tangible like examples on what you mean because
Examples
people
of
can always just be like, this is gonna bring so much like clarity. And it's like, how? Like, what kind of clarity? Or like this, just like you saying this is gonna bring about a bunch of freedom, even though we also know that like being within the US, and I think this is what you're gonna say is like, well, part of it is the fact that you left the US. And so that is like part of the freedom that you found is like just being away from it. But like if you just say like, oh, a lot of freedom is like gonna come from like moving within this framework that you like that is still like also not even like a widely like conceived thing.
I think I want to clarify that this is not like a like I'm selling this way of doing things. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? It's not
Hmm.
like, oh, if you do XYZ, then you are free. You know what I mean? Because I think
Hmm.
that's the whole point, is that like healing is not a destination, it's a journey. And I think what gets freed up in acceptance that you are a fugitive in the place where you are, and that fugitivity bears far more consequences within the confines of the US.
I was asking, because you were saying like you're a fugitive in the place that you are. So it's like in any place, or are you talking again specifically
In
about?
the US.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we're talking in the US, and we're talking about the positionality of being, because that's the positionality I can most directly speak to. I'm sure there are other parallels and other positionalities that mirror, you know, what it looks like to be a Black descendant of enslaved people in the US. Um, but no, I'm talking about the positionality of being a Black person in the States, predominantly speaking to the experience of being a descendant of enslaved people, because that adds to the ancestral and intergenerational liberation that comes from accepting and understanding your fugitive identity and moving from that knowing rather than moving from the like contrived and delusion of progress
Yeah.
that has been placed upon our like our population despite so much like statistical evidence to the contrary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And now that that is now especially that that like facade is falling with this you know Trump administration, I think it's even easier, it should be even easier for folks to accept like so this country was never meant to be a free place for us.
Mm-hmm.
All the narratives to the contrary have been to continue extracting our labor. It's just fun new ways to say, how do we keep extracting labor
That
from Black? Mm-hmm.
that reminds me of something
Yeah.
where, oh my gosh, yes, I was reading this post about how Neptune is moving into Aries. And like how the last time Neptune was in Aries, it was the Civil War. And also when this is what you remind me of, because it was like how slavery was abolished and completely dismantled the like ways of like slavery. And I'm like, it wasn't completely dismantled. It's literally
And very little of it was dismantled. Very like marginal things were
basically
dismantled.
just in name only. You know, like in name
Yeah.
only was it dismantled.
And
Um,
name only in the perhaps the trade
yeah.
of it all.
Hmm.
Um, the idea of owning a human being was somewhat shifted,
Hmm.
but only somewhat, because as we know, incarceration is that you were owned by the state
Hmm.
and completely subject to the will of your direct oppressors,
Yeah.
which is just
The
you
same
have no you
thing.
have very few rights,
Hmm.
and the rights that you even conceptually have are not respected. And I think that's a really it's like a really terrifying reality to just like sit within that. And I think that's like what I don't know, it surprises me how many people can live with that possibility so close by. As you know, like we've had many family members incarcerated. I've had many friends arrested. And I feel it is by the grace of God and my spirit guides that I have not, at this point, been wrapped up in the PIC so directly. And I just can't, I just think it's so vile, that I can't like psychically live in a place where that is just churning
All the time. Yeah.
all the while, you
Hmm.
know? And so, yeah, I mean, freedom from that alone is a massive weight off of my chest where I am then put in a position to be able to heal like through my traumas far more easily.
Hmm.
Um, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because it's that thing where it's like, I mean, in my studies of trauma,
Hmm.
the possibility of healing in the place where you were harmed is massively more difficult than being outside of that space. It's an uphill battle. It's an uphill battle that survivors don't deserve.
Hmm.
And because it's not only like a matter of like location where your body is like, oh, I'm still reliving this past trauma because I'm so situated here, but it's also that you are still in danger. You are still constantly in danger. And I think that's the thing. Black people are simply capital I, capital D in danger in the USA.
Hmm.
And the fact that we're just supposed to be like, that's our lot in life, you know. And I think there's something about from like my movements around the world. So like for the folks who don't know, I've spent time on every continent, like spent months at a time on every continent, and I've gotten to know several different cultures in whatever cursory way, you know, I'm able to, but like with I think more depth than the average traveler, just because of the way that I travel. I try to stay in people's homes when I can. For like the first big stretch of my traveling, I would say like with hosts, you know, people who deeply know the place. And since that has shifted, it's still been predominantly in people's homes. And now with a bit more of my like self assurance, I feel comfortable going to places that like I don't know anyone. But still never in these like resort settings or even like hostels where I'm predominantly surrounded by other people who are traveling. So like I've experienced how stuck in a context
Mm.
people just often are
Okay.
and feel really trapped within the cultural context, the social contracts that they are provided.
Yeah.
And it's like there is, we like Black Americans are often just trapped in the cultural context that is, I genuinely believe, the most like violent cultural context that we have access to on this planet. You know what I mean? That we as Black Americans, like that is the worst place for us. I think
Oh,
for
got
lots of
you.
other
Got you.
ethnicities, leaving the place where they're from is like, this is harder, you know, this is harder, this is less familiar, I'm more in danger as like the foreigner here. That's, and it's not that, it's not just Black Americans who experience this, of
Yeah.
course, but like I think especially when it comes to Black Americans of marginalized genders, but really it's all of us,
Hmm.
like that's the most dangerous place we can be, bro. And yet we have been convinced that it's somehow safer for us there than not. And that is what like baffles my mind, honestly. Do you
Yeah.
know what that is? Do you know why?
Do I know why that we're convinced that it's safer? Well, I think because we also know that anti-Blackness is literally everywhere.
Literal.
Not because it's not like a guaranteed thing that like, oh, you'll truly escape the anti-Blackness. And then
No.
when you do go to like if you did go to like a country within Africa where it is like, okay, well, it's not gonna be like anti-Blackness, but there's then this like can be this weird narrative of like being American and not
Yeah,
in and like that kind of like
it sucks.
mm-hmm,
Sucks,
mm-hmm.
honestly. It's a weird fucking place to be. And there's a lot of anti-Blackness on the African continent as well. So I just want to also name that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think because of that, it's like then for some people it might be like the devil you know versus like devil you don't. And then also how I say this about like within the US, how like with the South, it's like, yes, there's racism literally and anti-Blackness again throughout the entire country. But people will like to feel like, oh, the North or like the West is going to be like more tolerant. And it's like, well, no, that's not true. And also with the South, at least there's like a lot of interaction with Black people. And so it's like, there's that like sense of familiarity and like white people at least know how to like be around Black people, whereas within like when I was in the Pacific Northwest, it would kind of just be like, oh, this is weird. Like y'all are weird. Like y'all don't even know to be around me sometimes, or like it's just yeah, this like faux tolerance on the surface, but then once you get under the surface, it's like, oh, you're just like
That's true.
thinking you're not, but you really still are. And so I think that can also kind of apply like throughout the world as well, of like maybe people in other countries, I feel like especially in like Europe, they want to act like, oh, we're like more progressive. And we aren't like you in the US where we're still on our racist ways. But it's like
Yeah.
they're also, well, again, there are Black people in Europe, of course, but like
Money.
I don't feel like it's at the same degree. I don't know, I guess for sure. But just feeling like it would be similar to what it is like in the Pacific Northwest, where it's just like, oh, y'all don't even know like what's going on under the surface. I guess just that knowledge, yeah, that like anti-blackness is literally still everywhere. And so it's like that isn't you like you can't also escape to a place where you're not going to experience it.
I do think there are places where it won't be a part of your day-to-day experience, genuinely, on this earth. And I also think that it's one thing to seek to escape like the social irritation that is anti-blackness, but it's still the case that you're far less likely to be incarcerated in Europe, in any place in Europe. You know, that that's not the predominant response to like you existing,
Hmm.
um that you need to be incarcerated. And
Well,
also,
we'll just get
what?
kicked off a bus, you know. We won't be arrested, but
Yeah,
we'll get kicked off a
they'll
bus.
kick you off the bus. Exactly, and you have to walk home now. That happened to us. I It happened to us in Berlin,
Mm.
um where Erica had their feet on the seat of the bus, the last bus of the night. It was the middle of the night. It was like past midnight.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Mm-hmm.
this bus driver got up and came back to the bus, came to the back of the bus and yelled at us to get off the bus. And yeah, that fucking sucks. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's not fun. And I don't think I never suggest to people, oh, go to Germany. You
Yeah.
know, I do like we were particularly
Fugitive healing. Go to Germany.
go to Germany. That's where you'll find your healing. It's not.
No.
It's not. And so I do think like we need to be specific about, or not we need to be specific, but just the fact that like people will find the place that works for them. Um, like it's not every place, but still, we were not arrested. I didn't fear arrest as we were walking home at like 1 a.m. in the dark. Like we were like, oh, it's dark, but we weren't like, someone's going to accost us
No.
any minute, and subject us to violence. And it's also a place where it's much more, at least in Germany, it's much more common to just be on a stroll in the middle of the night. And that's where I mean like this assumption of criminality
Yeah.
is so it's built into the fabric
Yeah.
of the United States
Because
in a
even,
way.
sorry. Oh, I was just thinking about like loitering as well. Because like I knew that was something that was like became a crime, socialized as a crime, like um during what, Reconstruction or something?
I want to say more so a Jim Crow era law, but probably started becoming a thing. Um, Probably in the aftermath of Reconstruction, in those really sharp,
Yes.
um that sharp turn.
Yes. And how with when we were in Brazil, how it was just very common to see people just like sitting in front of
Hanging out.
and yeah, hanging out in front of businesses or anywhere.
Mhm.
Where it's just like even like standing in front of somebody's home, it's like, oh, what's happening? What are you doing? Like, are you trying to scope a place out? And like that didn't feel so like culturally a thing, I suppose. Whereas
No.
it is still something that like comes up. Like even walking around here, honestly, when because like we're close-ish to a place that seems a little bit more that has a little more money, it seems. I don't know, like and so when I was like walking past places and then I ended up turning around to walk past again, it's like, oh, like I'm scared these people are gonna be looking at me like what is this person doing? Like walking in front of my home like twice and like kind of standing for a second because I was like looking at the map and
Yeah.
um yeah, because also here like that it doesn't seem like as much of a thing here.
Loitering.
Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah, and I think that's just also the nature of like big cities. Like people are moving. It this feels like a place where people are, where are you going to
yeah,
go get, and arrive sort of thing. It seems more of a pace of life thing to me, at least here in Lima. And we haven't seen other areas of Peru. Um, but yeah, but still, there's one thing for something to be non-normative, and it's another thing for something to be immediately penalized or criminalized.
yeah, yeah.
And I think that's like my primary crux of.
Yes, and I get what you mean, but also like because like yes, we're in places slash you've been in places for months at a time. But there are still things that you're never going to, maybe not never, but like you wouldn't know within that few months of time. And so
Yeah.
it is like, yeah, I don't think if I wasn't from the US and I went to the US, like I don't know if I would know within a few months that like I can't just like stand around for a second.
But you would see cops everywhere, for one,
Yeah.
which I think sets a tone for a society.
But we've also seen cops everywhere in different places. Like in
Like,
Mexico, we saw cops like everywhere. Even here,
really?
like you see, yes, literally right after I got off of the off my plane, we were behind that cop truck with the guns.
Yeah.
And then like
But
that
that's
wasn't
not,
no, it's
yeah.
not, but like it was everywhere. Like I noticed them several times throughout my time there. Um, I think at least a couple times every time we went out. Like I don't,
You saw the cop truck with the guns every
um,
time we went.
not necessarily a cop truck with the guns, but like cops, like police vehicles. Yeah. So I just like I'm not trying to like dispute what you're trying to say, but I'm just
You
like
can you can dispute.
I just
You know, that's how theories are refined.
this is true. This is true. Um, and even within Brazil, I remember seeing cops a lot. It didn't strike as much of a like, oh no, is something gonna go down? But sometimes it would. I think especially because with their tolls, like when we were like taking the bus to go to a different part of the country, it just seemed like they were a lot more present than I would like than I remember seeing like driving throughout the US and like passing through tolls or something. It's like a lot more militarized.
Everywhere I've been, I believe I've seen cops, and I think that like the the US is quite literally like the model for, you know, what it means to like police your own population
Yeah.
for the world. And I think it's like it's one thing to see them. It's another thing to know like the statistical likelihood. And also, I think that is really like if we want to bring in the like American citizenship abroad aspect to things, wherein I feel far more protected with my American identity outside of America than I do within America.
Yeah.
Um, and that is like a something to contend with, that privilege, of
Hmm.
course, but like when like being detained abroad requires a pretty significant infraction, to be detained in the long term rather than just deported back to your country. And so I also find that to be oddly comforting, you know, um, in most places.
So, okay, this is just like a tangent question. If you like, yeah, say they're like, okay, you need to go, um, because of like what you did. Do you then, does your home country then like put it against,
Penalize you.
yeah,
Like,
or is it
yeah.
like within like, oh, what you did there isn't against our laws, so it's like
Like,
whatever.
yeah, that's your business.
Yeah.
Like, welcome home.
Mhm.
I don't fully know. I
Okay.
don't fully know. And I think it probably depends on the nature of the crime.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, there is a whole thing that like you can't, you almost like, you have to do something significant to be tried as like in the same way that a citizen of a country would be tried.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's messy. And I think that thankfully I haven't had to
Yeah.
really go
Yeah.
through
And hopefully,
the logistics of that. I mean, I will say like the root of this also came in from like reading Asata's autobiography, and for like a stretch of years feeling like a really direct affinity for and with Asata and her fugitive status, and her fugitivity being her like her way towards freedom, essentially, like that fugitivity existed as like a state of being for much of her life. She was living in the States.
okay.
There's a lot of fugitivity from like moving out of her house and like trying to like make things work. And I think a lot of folks have the experience of like a lot of displaced people, a lot of people who live with housing insecurity, a lot of people who move in and out of like homelessness, who are just like really trying to make it through like day to day, week to week, month to month.
Mhm.
You're already living in a state of fugitivity.
Yeah.
And I just think that I find it to be a much more rewarding experience of fugitivity outside of the nation, because when you're experiencing that fugitivity within the US, you are learning the ways of the state in a really like I don't, the phrase I want to use is like nose to the grindstone, but I don't know if that's really what it is. You know what I mean? But you are really learning the ins and outs of like that society when you are in the most marginalized position of that society. Like you get it, you get the core of it. And when we're looking to divest, decondition,
Yeah.
slough off the ways of the state as much as possible in order to build and like reside in a different future, then it's quite like counterproductive to be really in the thick of the confines of the state in that process. It's hard, you know? It's just really fucking hard to actually do that deconditioning work.
Hmm.
You're learning all sorts of skills, skills that will carry on with you. I don't think it's like a completely, fraught process. Like you're learning the ways of mutual aid, you're learning fugitive ways that I think are helpful. And then that will serve you outside
Yeah.
of like the belly of the beast, and also help you to really connect with other people out in the world who are like living this. There's so many people who are like making things work, but also without the constant threat of like, if you don't make things work, we're either going to incarcerate or kill you, or, in a way enslave you or
Yeah.
traffic.
Which is like literally, I made that face and I'm like, that's literally what happens. If you do not make it work, if you do not make enough money, if you do not abide by these or like live up to like what you need in order to like
Yeah.
just have a place to be,
The
essentially.
ever demanding standards. And that's also the thing. Like it's just getting harder. And so I just want to explore what it looks like to opt out of this like vice.
Yeah.
It's just fucked up.
We've been talking about like schools and like letting kind of like the whole school system like kind of collapse because we want to build something new anyway. And like the idea of like learning from each other, community schooling. Um, and but then it's like what that you're like, no, we can't heal on this on in that country. So,
Believes they can, then someone believes they can't. You know what I mean?
yeah,
If 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 you're like, this is I can do it.
yeah.
I have, then that's you, boo.
We're
And
all
I'm not
different.
here to tell someone that they cannot because
Yeah.
I trust people's inclination. You know what I mean? And so, Godspeed to you, my friends.
Yeah.
You know? But so I just want to make that clear. Like
Yeah.
I make these sweeping generalizations, but I also very much like trust that people, even if they don't truly know things for themselves at that given moment, that they have to know something for themselves,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so I just want to put that out there.
Yeah.
I can't.
Yes. And I think good to like voice because I think it is, especially in this kind of time, or not even especially in this kind of time, but just especially with how people talk and like when they talk about when they do say generalizations, a lot of people believe in those generalizations. Um, yeah. So then it's just like I think it is important to be like, yes, I'm saying this, and also understand
Not
that
everyone.
it's not going to be true for everyone, and it literally can't be true for everyone.
No. I simply don't believe anything can be true for everyone. I don't think there's a thing out there that's true for everyone. And that's a big part of our astrologically grounded
Mhm.
healing.
Mhm.
Because built in our understanding of revolutionary astrology is that we are all given our unique journeys. We are
Yeah.
all given our unique paths. We are
Yeah.
all given our own tools that we
Yes.
chose to engage with on this incarnation in this life.
In
So
life. Yeah.
I do that I've said my truth and had people tell me like, "Oh, I know I'm supposed to stay.
Yeah.
Like I am of the people who stay." And I'm like, "And God be with you." You know? You know that.
Yeah.
Who am I to tell you otherwise?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
Also, just doing things outside of the systems feels like fugitive healing, like
yes.
in the education. It's like the curriculum, I was just reminded about this actually, about how like, I was watching Love is Blind, and one of them is a teacher. This girl now sells social studies curriculum. And I'm like, that feels so gross. Like, why are there people selling curriculum, And then it's like, who are the people behind the curriculum who is selling it?
You're directly witnessing how our education is a business. Our education
And
system
that's what
as it
I'm
is
saying.
work.
And that's what I'm saying with like then going outside of it and like creating your own curriculum. Or just like creating your own curriculum that then goes far and beyond what is taught in
The
schools.
standardized testing
Exactly. Like that,
mark.
I feel is like how I conceive a fugitive healing. Um,
Totally.
yeah,
Totally. Because I really feel like here's here's my concern with, and I'm not deep in this, but I'm sure there are folks right now who are like coming together fighting to save the Department of Education.
yeah,
Giving them, giving this administration, this government, any government up till this point, because I've trusted none of them, the infrastructure to dictate a standardization of learning, which we know has
the benefit.
only recently become anything self-critical. Only in these last like handful of years become somewhat self-critical of, the nation and the states and the history. If there's a fight to retain it, to retain that infrastructure, and knowing whose hands it's in and knowing whose hands it's always going to be in,
Exactly.
then what are we fighting to maintain except like the white supremacist brainwashing that we've all been subject to? Why would we want to maintain that? And so like it makes me think of the Undercommons, my fave. One of my fave texts by Fred Moten and Stefano Harney. And a lot of that is grounded in like the community education, the community organizing that can be done within the institution, but under the undercommons of the institution. Like we're all here and we're doing this work together because we're like situated in this space, but it's not institutional learning that we're doing. But that's only necessary when those institutions are like remain strongly intact. But what can we achieve without the institution at all? What can we achieve if we like truly lean into autonomy and anarchy
Mhm.
and fill in those ever widening gaps with something revolutionary rather than fighting to maintain the violent institutions as they are? It's just very, I'm confused.
Yeah.
You I guess that's where I'm deviating um, from leftists who, socialists, I suppose, folks who still believe in a positive version of this government.
And
That's possible.
it wouldn't be necessarily socialists, but just like socialists who believe in reform of this current government.
I mean, but the nature of socialism is a strong government.
Yeah,
Socialism
yeah.
requires that.
You don't,
So
yeah. No, I know. But I'm saying because you're like of this government. Like, so I guess I'm essentially saying like, but like a person who's also a socialist, or if like the government was like made of socialists, would it would be different than a government full of fascists.
yeah, but that's a reform. We're reforming this government by filling it with socialists
Hmm.
who seek to maintain infrastructure and even expand,
Hmm.
government backed infrastructure.
Hmm.
And I mean, there's lovely things as well, like limit corporate power, etc. But I'm just saying, like, I think that's where I'm finding that I'm deviating from
Got to.
like a belief in an idealistic socialist government and moving more into fugitivity, anarchy, autonomy
Hmm.
as my hope for the future, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm still, there's a little dissonance as always. I don't know. I think being alive is being dissonant to some degree. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I know you hate cognitive dissonance, but there, it's within you as well, girl.
I know, and
Yeah.
I hate.
Okay.
I want to rid myself of it as much as humanly possible.
Yeah, but I don't think it's ever gonna be completely gone. Like, I don't know. I don't see how
It.
that can happen either.
I think it can happen
Okay, we'll see.
because it's like it's not that everything has to be every contradiction has to be expelled, but it can be integrated.
Hmm. But even if it's integrated, I feel like there's still dissonance.
No, I don't think so. I think dissonance implies that it's not integrated, that you're holding these dissonant truths, you have yet to integrate them, and yet you march on.
Mhm. I I feel like it's more of just knowing that there are two truths.
No, because no, I don't think so.
Like, I'm just thinking about like the idea of like wanting. Ooh, okay. I guess I'm like when I think about like what it means to be like post death, like what that is. And
Okay.
like thinking that there's some kind of like afterlife kind of vibe of like something resembling what we like commonly call like heaven.
Okay.
Um, but then also believing in folks like being reincarnated or like spirits continuing on into other lives. And like that is like two kind of separate things with
Yeah, and why can't they both exist? Why wouldn't there be a situation where you've died, like you can chill out at the spot, you can
Mhm,
come back to Earth, you could go
mhm.
like that's just options. That's just an
Yeah.
understanding of options.
Yeah.
I think. I don't think that's dissonance
Okay.
personally, but that's because I've integrated it. You know what I mean? If someone's like, oh, like heaven or reincarnation, how do
Mhm,
they fit together? I don't understand how it could happen. And so I'm just gonna like rest it aside.
mhm,
And I don't understand, and I'm just like, and I go to church and I learn about heaven. And when I'm there, I'm like, yeah. And then when I'm talking to Buddhists and they're like reincarnation, I'm like, yeah. And if you ask me what I believe, I'm like, that's dissonance. That's someone who's like experiencing a dissonance.
mhm.
If you then just like take time to integrate it into a genuine belief, which is that there is not one post death experience,
No.
that there that we live in like a multi-dimensional, like multi-universe.
Yeah.
And why would one believe that there's just this one pathway post being deceased?
Yeah.
Then you've integrated the dissonance and it's no longer dissonant, you know
Okay.
is how I relate to dissonance, and the belief that we can really contend with all of it. That it just takes some thought and curiosity and opening up of the mind, or an understanding that something has you have to let a belief go, you know.
Hmm.
I still wanted to talk about quitting though, as like a big part of my fugitive healing,
Yeah.
which I think is into the letting things go and honestly doing away with the dissonance, because I do think that in many ways labor is like tethers us most to the dissonance and the inability to like live a fugitive life, conventional labor,
Yeah.
you know. And so I believe so deeply in the liberating power of quitting, And yet within our society, I think it's changing, it's shifting, which is why I want to like seize this opportunity.
Remember like quiet quitting? It was such a small little blip, but it was there for a second. Were you not saying that quitting was like something that people felt like okay with for a little bit?
It's on the rise. I mean, it's what they say the narrative for Gen Z
But I
is
feel
that
like
we
that
shouldn't
narrative
feel
is already like being crushed. You know what I mean? Like they're all,
because of forced scarcity and recession. There's like that. It's a very intentional
yeah,
thing that they're trying to. Yeah,
exactly.
it's like a sort of reform quitting. You're still giving your time, but I think it's great. I think it's fantastic for people if that's what if
I
that's what they
don't
need
know.
to do.
Like I feel like it's not really within the reform because you're still like I get what you mean because it's like on the surface still showing like that there are people at these like companies. But I feel like it's one of those things where it's like if you're not doing if it's truly, whereas like someone's like not gonna do the thing, but then they're getting paid for it. It's like you're getting paid to not support the company.
Not to contribute.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that's a vibe. Yeah,
exactly.
want to see more quiet quitting,
Yeah, yeah.
but
I
I think it's even hard. I mean, think about it when you had that job. I was encouraging you all the time to quiet quit. I was like, you have no future in this
hmm
company and this nonprofit. You don't want to do this. What is stopping you? So then that's a question. What was stopping you
yeah.
internally from quiet quitting?
What was stopping me? What was stopping me? Which I think I did to some degree, not fully.
Not at all.
Um, not halfway.
No, not even, yeah, not above 50% quiet quitting. I would say you were
Yeah.
less so quiet quitting than quiet quitting. I wouldn't call it quiet quitting at all. You performed your tasks and you were not only performed them, but you were stressed out about them. You put, you invested in them, even though you knew you didn't want a future in not even just that job, but even in that field.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why I also don't have full hope
And quite
in
quitting.
that as
Yeah.
a waypoint. But if folks have it in them, I love it.
Yes.
Do it,
Yes.
but don't be like that's what I'm doing, and you're giving your all, and you're tired at the
No,
end of the
I was
day.
not giving my all.
You
Okay.
were giving a lot.
I
You
was
were
giving
giving a lot.
my all, but I get
You,
you.
you wanted to decompress that. You said, "Oh, that was I had a
I
day."
mean,
You know,
anytime I can
anytime
think
I
about something for an hour.
I gotta
Take
decompress.
a breath.
Where's my edible? I need a TV show. But that's what I mean because that's what the labor does. It puts
Yeah.
us in a position where we don't have the energy
Yeah.
for anything beyond consumption, for anything beyond consumption on the other side of it, you know?
Yeah, maybe I wasn't quite quitting, whatever. Um, call me out, I guess.
You still didn't really say why.
Okay, well, why I didn't do it was because it was a scarcity vibe, of like not wanting to be fired because of like not people not seeing like any kind of results and stuff like that. And like not I guess realizing that like there were definitely some things. I guess I just knew that at some point, like some kind of result would need to be there. But it is annoying. And I like for the people out there who are like considering quiet quitting and for you to actually do it is because with this position, it was also a contract position. So I knew it was only a year long. Um, and I had kind of specific projects that I was working on. And now I'll go back on that website to where supposedly the result of my project was going to go, and it's not there. And it's like,
Exactly.
okay,
Because it's a nothing.
it's
It's a
nothing.
nothing thing. And that's where it's like when you're able to clock, oh, this is a nothing thing. Like
Hmm.
you can use that to your advantage and do nothing,
Yeah.
you know? Be like, I'm learning. I don't know what's going on. Like I'm actually having trouble with this. Like there's
And
just
I think that's part of it of like not having, and this being a part of fugitive healing as well, and like letting go of like,
a need for
needing to be,
approval.
yeah, a need for approval, or like showing people in spite of what you think they're gonna think of you. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like proving yourself because you think that people are gonna perceive you in a certain way.
either way. You know what I'd be saying? I love to fulfill a stereotype. I love to fulfill a stereotype. I don't give a fuck. I'm fulfilling a stereotype. Oh, you think this is what black people do? Yeah, it's what I do too. We do it. We
Hmm.
do it. Oh no. Like, okay, like, who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares? I do think escaping a need for validation. And that's where it's like again with the dissonance that I want people to actually contend with. And that's what I hate about dissonance. Not that it exists because we are confronted with so much dissonance.
Yeah.
And so it's like pretty inescapable, but
Yeah.
that you sit with and integrate it and make a choice of how you're going to move forward.
Hmm.
Because it's folks saying all day long, like this is a white supremacist society, this is a patriarchal society, this is a misogynist society. I don't want like to be approved of, to be validated of, to be accepted by, to be uplifted within this society. You have to maintain those systems of oppression. And so people know this top to bottom, and yet they want to ascend in the society.
Hmm.
And I'm just like, what do you think that requires? We
Yeah.
have to understand what that requires. And so it's just like, it's odd to me. It is odd to me that people will hold both and act like it's not directly going against their integrity, values, or what they claim to want to receive those accolades, to receive the certification, to get the promotion, to get the good work review. It's giving the severance. Spoiler for the one of the season twos of Severance. But like it's giving the Milchek moment,
Yeah.
where they're like, you are not subjugating well enough, you are not diminishing yourself enough, and you
Hmm.
are taking liberties,
Hmm.
and that's bad. And so that is what it will take in order to get our approval. You have to be meaner, you have to silence yourself,
Yeah.
and like that is literally the truth. Like, and so why are we, what do we want? I think it's like, I think fugitive healing requires a sort of adaptability, like quickness with like what you're working with and how you want to handle it,
Yeah.
rather than there's no autopilot allowed with fugitivity, you know? You have to be thinking, you have to be doing, you have to be like making choices. No,
Yes.
you have to be
No,
making the
I know,
choices,
I know, I know.
And I think that like
That's
helps to
hard for
free
folks.
you. It's hard. It's hard. I think mutable signs, if you're on that mutable axis, if you are a mutable dominant person, I think it'll work for you most. Cardinal signs, you're number two there. I think you'll be able to like make those decisions as they come.
Hmm.
Fixed signs, it's hard. I
Yeah.
think fugitive healing would work if you find a place and you situate yourself
Yes.
fugitively. Yeah. I am
Citrus.
fugitively here, and that's where I am.
I'm
Well,
excited about next time though. We're gonna be, I think, talking kind of on similar lines with propaganda.
oh, it's our propaganda episode next.
And
I mean, we're talking propaganda in the media in particular, like less so like news or type
Ah,
propaganda,
exactly.
but more so like what's going on in these TV
Trying to
shows,
show us and like what is the hidden meaning behind it.
and what's going on here. Okay, well, I'll see you then, sis. I
Uh-huh.
love it.
Sure. Love you too. Bye.